they said it wouldn't fit. It fitted. They said it wouldn't run. It ran. And now they say it'll never drive.
Hey, what's up?
I have decided that I'd quite like to drive this car. I know, who would have thought that would be a goal for this? But there are one or two things that have to be done first. That might be one of them. So with any luck, at the end of the day, this V10 Patrol will move under its own power. Hopefully. So the things that I have to do today consist of the following, and more. Giving Whoopi Goldberg a haircut. Improving my Wi-Fi steering setup. Making it so my gay stick gets the D. And making it so that my transmission actually does something. Somewhere in there. Now I'm going to do this bit first because the car is already up in the air. But basically, this is my shifter cable. This is where the shifter cable has to go on. And this bit right at the back, in a very difficult to reach spot, is the bracket for the cable. It turns out some of this build is typical Touareg style. So I'm going to have to take off the exhaust to reach it, which is a bit annoying. If only Volkswagen had designed an easy to remove exhaust for this exact purpose. One thing you'll learn to hate about Volkswagen is that they like to use long bolts in very awkward places with a lot of Loctite on them. This means they struggle the entire way until the last thread. Thanks, Volkswagen. There's always that element of satisfaction when factory things bolt onto stuff that you've built. Now that was tedious and horrible. But what this means is that if my car is going to allow me to put it in drive, it means it should go forwards on its own. But we all know that's probably not going to happen. Anyway, you might remember from a few episodes ago, I made these weird little plates as adapters to put the shafts on my car. And that was basically to convert a Patrol shaft into a Touareg shaft. And what I did was make a stack of plates. And this was a stupid idea. None of you called me out on it, so shame on you. So I've decided to revisit this and use the dimensions that I measured in the last episode in order to make these plates and transfer them to a solid bit of aluminium. But first, I should probably change my clothes and grow my hair. Now, one of the problems of having a minuscule lathe is this. You encounter situations where size does matter. And my 3-jaw chuck is not big enough to cope with this bit of aluminium. I have made this piece, which does fit in my lathe, and I've made a hole in this piece of aluminium. Now I have a way of mounting this in my lathe. You might scream OSHA at me. But all I'm going to do is turn this outer diameter until I can flip it around and actually mount it in the lathe so it's somewhat self-centering. The other thing is, it's only going to be turning at about 380 RPM. So even if, in the extremely unlikely event this does fly off at maximum velocity, it's going to go about this far. So shut up. So seeing as I have to make another adapter to connect this shaft to this flange, I'm going to take off this flange, just to make it easier to measure. So there are a few plans for this. I can't really take this out because it's in a 3-jaw chuck, and if you know anything about 3-jaw chucks, when you take something out and put it back in again, it's never 100% as it was. So if I can manufacture this all as one thing without taking it out, it'll be perfectly true. Anyway, in here there's about a 5mm step down to there, so I'm going to machine this down and have it so it locates on there. That might involve some fancy boring, but I'll tackle that when I get to it. Anyway, the other thing to look at is this side, because I plan on bolting from this side into the plate from here. So I'm going to have to make this chamfer a little bit deeper so I can get the head of the bolt flush on this surface. Annoyingly, just broke a tool and it literally cracked in half. This is why you don't buy cheap tools, kids. So this now fits really nicely onto here. Very snug fit, so that'll be perfectly aligned, theoretically. But unfortunately, I've got to take out this piece of material so I can flip this around and machine the bits that I need. So, shaft spacer, shaft, thing. Shaft spacer goes on the shaft. Thing goes on the shaft spacer. Now I have a Nissan drive shaft successfully bolted to a Touareg gearbox. Now the only thing about this that I'm likely to get called out on is that I am marking all the holes out by hand. Because I don't have a dividing head, simple as that. But there's a tight fit here on these concentric circles, so it'll be self-centering anyway, so it won't matter. Next on the agenda is doing something about the steering. You can't even see it. It's somewhere down there. And coming under here doesn't really improve matters. Basically, this little knuckle here is the thing that connects my steering box to the steering wheel. And you might see this weird little lumpy bit on it. This might cause problems. And that's because this little intercooler pipe at the back is incredibly close. So what I may have to do, if there is a problem, is machine this back and through bolt it instead. But hopefully it doesn't come to that. It's not that hard. All I have to do is drop this little steering column down, shove the shaft into the hole, and then bolt it all back up again. And as if by magic, I have steering. I can now turn the wheels, and there'll definitely not be any clunking noises of steering items hitting intercooler pipes. I wish I could show you how perfectly that fits. Now, according to VSCCS Engineering Certifications, or VSB 14, or Australian Design Rules 3rd edition, which apply to this car, I need about 10mm of gap. More is better, but 10mm is enough. Or one greasy finger. Now, I've also measured this gap. It's basically 10.5mm all around. You can't get much more perfect than that, unless it was half a mil shorter. Now this might not be 100% necessary, but I'm going to attach the shifter knobs and I'm going to put the center console in, because this has these weird little windy dials that control the four-wheel drive system. And because this is a full-time four-wheel drive car, if I've only got one drive shaft fitted and I put it in drive, nothing's going to happen. But if I can then put it in four-wheel drive and lock that center diff, it kind of annoys me when people call it a center diff, but when they do that, it should drive with just one drive shaft. I've got the long wheelbase GQ shaft now. Massive thank you to everyone who reached out to try and give me one, apart from the guy who offered me a double cardan shaft and then became a ghost. You, sir, are a tease. Top tip for if you've taken one of these off a Touareg at home and you can't get it back in. This is like a spring retracted lever. Blow it and grab it, just like your mother taught you. So this is what you would call a minimalist interior. Basically the absolute bare minimum that it needs to go forwards, maybe backwards, and maybe stop. Stopping. This car currently does not stop. It's got a brake pedal, somewhere under there, and an absolutely delightful set of brand new brake pads and discs with red calipers for extra speed. However, I am missing something slightly critical. 2 brake lines. Because they were slightly difficult to get off when I tore this car apart in the first place. And I'm too cheap to buy new ones, plus they need to be slightly different to account for the massive engine in this car. So I'm going to make my own. Now firstly, materials. Oh mate, you can't use copper lines, that's illegal, I read it on a forum once. Shut up, you dickhead. These are copper nickel brake lines. They're perfectly legal to use in Australia. Why use them over steel? This is a steel brake line. Pretty difficult to bend, and steel tends to rust. Not that that's really a concern, it's mostly the first point that I'm worried about. This is extremely easy to work with and doesn't corrode. They both do the exact same thing, so I'm going to use the easy option. Now as usual, nothing with this project goes perfectly smoothly. This set of brake lines came with these fittings. These are not the same as these fittings. They'll both screw into the same holes, but one is more blurry than the other. That's better. I believe this is an M10 by 1mm, and this is some kind of imperial tomfoolery. Now it's not really ideal to reuse old connectors, but I'm going to basically chop these off and reuse these fittings. They're in good condition, they'll do the job just fine. It's just not exactly ideal. Now going back to these, if you look at this end, you'll see this is a flared fitting, of sorts. This particular one is a double flare. And what that means is that it's flared once, and then flared again. And this is basically just a little bit of extra added security for your brake system. Now this comes with its own host of annoyances. Firstly, if it's a single flare, you can pretty much just get away with hammering it with a punch and making a flare on the end. Double flare gets a little bit more complicated, because there are 2 of them. And this makes the need for fancy wanky tools like this, which is basically a turret brake line system. Basically you have a series of blocks, and these depict your size of brake line. And inside here is the angle at which you're going to set your brake flare to. In my case, I'm going to do 45 degrees, which means that I'll basically turn it this way. You then slide your pipe in and gently tighten it down. Now this is just a demonstration, I'm not making a proper brake line yet. Anyway, Operation Zero basically aligns all your brake lines into the right place. So that flattens my brake hose against this block and pushes the block back against this stop here. Now I can tighten it down properly. Just got to check something. That's exactly 4.75, and this means that my first operation will be choosing the 4.75mm. Then I change it to operation 2 for the same diameter pipe. That should be a double flared pipe. And that's come out absolutely beautifully. As you would expect from anything I do. Now before you do this, obviously, you'd get that fitting on there because it won't fit over a flared end. But this is just a demonstration piece and I'm going to chop it off anyway. But you get the idea. So brake lines. Here's what I have to do. There are 2 ports in this master cylinder. First one here, second one around the back there that you probably can't see. But my finger's in it. I have to get both of these to come out, go down into the depths, and then connect into this manifold thing. So that's what's going to happen. So that is one of the 2 brake lines done. You might notice little weird things about it. And these weird things are these wavy bits. What's this for? Well, in case you didn't know, your chassis is bolted to your body, or the other way around. And they're not solidly bolted, which means that they can move independently of each other. So your brake lines and everything associated with your brakes at the wheel end is all bolted to the chassis. Your master cylinder is bolted to the body. That means there's a slight bit of movement between the two. Not a lot, but enough that could cause a problem over several 100,000 kilometers. And that's what this is for. This is almost like a little spring to allow a bit of give in there so that it doesn't constantly fatigue my lines. And before you say it, no, this is not the same as what Nissan did. You've probably seen on various cars, they'll do a coil like this, some of them will do it this side, like on this car, but either is fine. Which is why I've decided to use Toyota techniques on Nissan. Fight me below, tell me I'm wrong. Anyway, seeing as I have one of these pretty much made, it's going to be very easy to make the next one, because the only difference is, the other pipe exits at a slightly different point here, and enters the brakes about half an inch further along the line. But this complicated shape is going to be very easy to make an exact replica of. Brake lines. Now let's see if they work. Or not. Because my combined inventory of brake fluid consists of this much. About 1 caliper of varying coloured brake fluid. That's how you bleed brakes when you don't have any friends. So, driving this thing, just about ready to go. Apart from the most hideous little thing I've ever done. Mostly because I haven't made the other drive shaft yet. So I'm just going to hold it like that so it can actually drive somewhere using just the front wheel drive. I believe it is time. For this car to go somewhere by itself with the driver for the very first time in a very long time. Now the end of this project is a dot on the horizon, but we should continue as we began. This chair isn't going to work. So, bit of mixed success. It drives. A total of about 5 meters, which definitely still counts. I would have driven a lot further, but I think I have a problem with the selector stick in the middle. And I'm guessing it's mostly because I forgot to disconnect it when I dropped the engine, and it's probably stretched massively out of adjustment. So once I've sorted that, I'm sure it'll drive fine. So shut up. Bye.